Fine. Okay. I'm going live. I gotta go. Bye. Good evening, YouTube. We're finally live and in living color. My apologies for the technical difficulties that we've had and all the noise that you're going to hear in the background. I know it's ridiculous and we're working on it, but sometimes things just take a minute. So, welcome to the beginning. Let me ask you a couple questions. How many days do you find yourself worried as you're listening to news broadcasts or flipping through on YouTube and finding out that people are being killed left and right? They're shooting up schools, they're going through and doing atrocious things to people on this earth. What do you think when you hear these big storms and floods and tornadoes in places where they've never been, volcanoes erupting endlessly, and earthquakes that just happen every minute, like recently happened in Iceland? Do you find yourself feeling afraid? Because if that's the case, then that's exactly what we're talking about. Tonight, we're going to discuss the end of days and what that looks like. But before we begin with just the end of days, here's the thing I want to remind you of, okay? For those of us who are believers in the Lord, for those of us who know who Jesus is, this is not a scary time because everything that you see happening means that the end is coming closer and closer to the end. That's what it means. The end being when Jesus returns. And I want you to understand that because the goal at this point in time is to make sure that you begin to lose hope in everything that you see. For you to lose hope that he's going to come through. As a matter of fact, the Bible tells us that the reason God shortened these end of days is because if he didn't, things are going to, things are going to get so bad that if he didn't shorten the days, no flesh would be saved. And that's the thing that's hardest to understand. You see, one of the biggest struggles of the Bible, not the Bible itself, but the way that the Bible is taught, is that people like to teach it in this hocusy pocusy kind of way, right? And instead of just coming with the cold hard facts, the logic and the reason, the deep understanding of what the word says, we come at it from this perspective that, oh my God, there's all these things that are happening. Listen, it is not that dramatic. Are the things that are going to come at the end dramatic? Of course they are. But it's because of the decisions of man that things become dramatic. So let's go into our verse tonight. We're coming out of the New Living Translation, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. You ready? You should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there will be very difficult times, for people will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, and unthankful or ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God. They will act religious, but they will reject the power that could make them godly. Stay away from people like that. You see, what you're seeing right now, we're going to start first with people. What you're seeing right now is exactly what has been spelled out in Timothy. People have become so obsessed with themselves. And if you need proof of that, just go hop on this little itty bitty thing called Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat and look at all the plethora of people who are sitting back there going, look at me, look at me, look at me. That's the world that we live in today. Everyone is out to make themselves look good. We don't talk about when we have hard times. We don't talk about when things are getting us down. No, The goal is to have 300,000 subscribers, 200,000. It's all about us. And it's all about the money that we can make because of this. And so there are certain things that happen when we make this decision, when we operate in the love of money, like we're seeing right now. People who operate in the love of money will do certain things. Number one, they'll lie. Without a conscience, they will lie. You know, back in the early 1970s, the federal government of the United States began doing experiments with the food that we eat on a daily basis. They began to genetically alter it. And as a result of that, they started noticing that there were these health issues that happened. Schools like Harvard, Princeton, MIT all came out against genetically modifying food. All of them did. But go Google it today and see what happens. They all come back with a very different tale. They all come back saying, oh no, there's nothing wrong with genetically modifying the food. Everything is healthy. You see, this is what the love of money does. And this is what we see unfolding in today's society. It's not that money, the love of money hasn't always existed. What it is that it's more obvious right now. It's not just obvious, it's more prevalent at this moment in time. And the reason for that is because as it gets closer to the end, people start to rush, they start to hurry. But is it the people who start to hurry, or is it the spirits behind them that start to push for a faster turn? You see, you have to always remember that behind every action, there's a spirit. And that spirit is not a ghost, it's literally a demon. And people don't like that because that, in their mind, enters into the realm of hocus pocus. But if you understand the Bible thoroughly and completely, there's only two sides: the Father side and the demon side. You get to choose one, and the choice is yours. Which one do you choose? Because you see, when we do things that are against what the Father has asked of us, when we do things that the Father wouldn't recommend for us, then guess what? We're operating on the side of the demon. That's just a fact. There are many people who would want to argue it, but there are just certain things you can't argue. You can't argue gravity, it holds you to the ground. You can't argue whether or not the world is flat or round. Obviously, it's round. We keep going around it. There's never a time you reach the end of the ocean and fall into an ever never ending pit. It doesn't happen. You see, we've got to start interjecting logic into how we see the Bible, because we're not talking about building a head knowledge. We're talking about taking the heart knowledge that is already woven into into the fabric of our being, and then using that knowledge to process through our mind to give us a deeper understanding of what the Bible is all about. And in a previous study, one of the things that we talked about was the fact that the Bible was written for mankind, humankind, for those of you who are sensitive. When we live in this time of people loving themselves, they stop being concerned with what everybody else needs. The thing that made families powerful is that they were first concerned with how well they were functioning, and then they were concerned with how the community was functioning, because everybody understood that it was the families within those communities that allowed the community to blossom and to flourish. And we've forgotten those principles. We've moved away from them and began to act in a way that moves us further from that. People today are boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, and unthankful. Nobody appreciates what they have. And if you want to talk about God, well, let's look at exactly how he's being treated. We have reached a place now where we act like God doesn't have the ability to communicate for himself. And see, these are the things that as we go through different chapters in the Bible, what we find out is this. You see, the Father has already laid out for us what is getting ready to happen. And one of the things he explained is that no matter what happens, and this you will find in Revelations all the way through as he talks to the different churches, and a few chapters beyond that, as he explains, the more the judgments fall upon this earth, the more angry and bitter people will become, and the more they will mock him. But when it hits the point that they realize they're in trouble, that is, the people who are destroying the earth, what they'll do is they'll head for the mountains and they'll try and run and hide from the one who's on the throne. You see, don't ever get this twisted. The people who are actually pulling the strings are not the presidents of the United States. They're not the presidents of different countries. Some of the presidents of different countries are involved in this, but the majority are not. There are groups of people who are actually in control, just like a little puppet show. They are not confused that there is a God, but what they have learned is that to control people, there are key things that have to happen. You ready? Because I'm going to give you a list. Number one, you got to take away their hope. You see, if you don't have hope, guess what? You live a life that's reckless. You don't take accountability. You don't care about what happens to others. You're more concerned about how you feel than what's actually happening. You see, everyone knows that feelings are sand. And if I can get you caught inside of what you feel, you'll stop thinking. And the moment you stop thinking, I have you. If you understand that that's what's behind this, you can begin to work your way out of it. And the way that you work your way out of it is by stopping and saying, okay, let's think this through. How is this unfolding? What is this looking like? What is the reason behind this? What is the purpose? Where's the money trail? These are the things that you want to start asking, because these are the things that are going to let you know where all of this is coming from. It's vital to the success of people that they be able to logically and rationally and reasonably understand this. You see, God is here, and that's the beauty of him. You see, I don't ever want you to be afraid of what man can do. Can man hurt you? To a point. But when you have the seal of the Father, of the Holy Spirit, 10,000 will fall on your right and 10,000 will fall on your left. And guess what? Not a hair on your head will be hurt. Will there come a point in time that you may pass away? Of course, it's appointed once for a man to die. That's just a fact. Nobody gets out of life alive. I never understood why people make such a big issue out of this. Death is a part of life. We live, we die. It's what happens. But when we understand that, then we begin to see things a little differently. So we talked about number one and how people can kill your hope. Number two, I divide you. That's what you're going to see a lot of coming through these next few years that we're going to go through the coming of the end as we're working our way to the Antichrist who stands in the temple and professes to be the Lord. These are the things that you're going to see. It's dividing people. And that dividing work is designed to separate this group A from group B. And for this example, group A is the group that the Father is getting ready to take, and group B is the group that the enemy is going to take. And here's what I want you to understand. There are a lot of people who are walking around in churches who will end up in group B. Again, we do not forsake the fellowshipping of the saints. But while you're sitting in that church, make sure that you're being fed and that you genuinely understand the word. And that if you're feeling fear, You start looking for the answers in that area to remove that fear, because fear can only exist where there's a lie. And that lie doesn't necessarily come from you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're the one telling the lie. It means that the information you received is not factual and therefore is incapable of being processed. What I want you to understand right now is this: as long as your job and your goal is to seek Jesus, to know him, to be with him, to serve with him, then here's what's going to happen: you're going to be fine. You're going to be out there. You're going to be taking in his word. You're going to begin to live and to feel things. And you're going to begin to see the Bible open up in a very different way. Because when you understand that Jesus is always for you, that when he's with you, he's holding you with his arms, with you, your back is to his front and his arms are around you. And the two of you are walking through whatever challenge together as one in unison, you can lessen the pain that you feel. And therefore, you can stop the fear that is causing you to stumble. That's what the Bible is about. It's about removing the fear of man completely out of your life. There is no human alive who can hurt you. The beauty is that because you were designed to be fruitful, you have ideas and understandings and things that can blossom. And when those things blossom, guess what happens? You start creating and developing and growing. And the things that come out of that are undeniably breathtaking. They're life changing. And don't give yourself away for free. You are not here to suffer. And there's too many of us who follow the word and think we're supposed to do things for free, but the word is very clear. Your job is to sell it. And if you don't sell it, guess what? People will take advantage, because that's what they do. It just is who they are. As believers, we develop an unoffendable spirit. Things don't offend us. They get on our nerves, but it's not an offense. We don't hold on to it. If a cop stops me and pulls me over, I don't have any reason to be disrespectful to him. You know, it was funny. I was driving cross country on Highway 80 and I was in Nebraska. And this cop pulled me over. He swore up and down that I had been drinking, or I don't know what he thought, but he pulled me over, right? I don't drink, so it wasn't an issue. And he said, "Hey, can you come sit in the car with me?" And I said, "Okay." And I got out of the car and I walked over and I spent the entire time I was with these guys educating them on how to buy tax sale properties. I don't even know why the guy pulled me over. He did not give me a ticket. He gave me a warning and sent me on my way. I hopped in my car. What could have been a problem wasn't a problem, because I didn't see it as a problem. And as believers, that's where we have to be. We don't see things as problems that the rest of the world tries to pretend are problems. We don't do that. We let them be. We give them information. We help them understand whatever it is that our thing is. And some of them will want to listen. And some of them will look at you like you're crazy. But guess what they won't do? They will not ask you to sit in their car again. That's just kind of how it goes. That's the beauty of walking with Christ. We don't waste our time being offended. We already know that humanity is imperfect. They're going to say things that are dumb. They're going to do things that are dumb, but we don't waste our time being offended. We keep it moving. Does that mean there aren't some situations that we deal with? Oh, yeah. There are some situations that we will have to deal with. But I want you to understand that when we deal with humanity, you're dealing with people who don't want to know, who don't know what they don't know, who don't understand what all is at stake. You can't hate them for that. You've got to learn how to take people by the hand and lead them through, because that's what Jesus did for each and every one of us. Each of us who claim that we are in the kingdom, at some point, he took our hand and began to walk with us. Verse 3, they will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self control. If you haven't been on social media, then you're unfamiliar with this. But those of you who have experienced Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all of this, it's a cesspool of negativity and nastiness. People are real big and bold when they're behind a keyboard. They're not quite so big and bold when they're standing in your face. But this is what they do. They slander. They lie. They libel against people. Libel is what happens when you write something. They have no self control. They don't know how to control their emotions, and therefore they're on a life of sand. And if you understand that that's where they are, you can learn to develop patience. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God. What else can be said? Finally, and the most important, they act religious, but they reject the power that exists to change their life as they know it. Are you going to be one of those people who rejects that power? Are you going to be one of those people who sits back and says that God doesn't have the ability to change things? Because he does. He always has. He's not relinquished at all. But he gave us the chance so that there could be no argument. Because remember this, at the end of the day, the one thing he knew is that we were made out of dirt. There were going to be things that we didn't understand. There were going to the simplicity with which our mind thinks in comparison to the vastness of the galaxies, the universe, everything that we live within is nothing more than the grain of sand. That's the amount of thought we process. Even the most brilliant mind might be 2 grains of sand in comparison to the entire universe. The reason that God tells us to have childlike faith is because when we have childlike faith, the things that happen can't steal our hope. When we watch people in our lives become nasty and embittered and to do things that are just atrocious and hurtful, we can't be hurt because we look at them and we begin to question, well, why would they do that? What is it that made them think that? How come? And if you think about a child, what does a child do? They sit back and they go, I don't understand. And they ask questions. That's what they do. They ask questions. And that's what I want you to start doing. Ask questions. What is it that is behind somebody's actions? What is it that makes them react and behave the way that they do? Is it that they're bitter? Is it that they're angry? Or is it that they're really hurting and they don't know how to deal with that pain? Next, the weather. The weather has been quite unique. As most of you know, I'm a native to the state of California. I love my state. My state does not always love me, but I love my state. I used to love the fact that we always had sun and that you could travel to snow and cold and all of that. But lately, that has not been so. The weather in California is changing. And it's a little problematic because California is not designed for weather. The sewer systems, everything is a mess. Okay. I believe it was Iceland recently had 400, no, every minute they had an earthquake. Every minute. And then they became this active volcano everywhere. A lava is just flowing. Guess what? The weather patterns are changing because it's part of this whole correction process that the earth is going through. Let me explain that in a more biblical sense. The areas that were dry and barren, like the deserts, are going to become lush green lands. And the areas like the Midwest that were once where they did all their growing are going to become the dry deserts. It's all in the word. And I want you to understand that. We're going to go a little more into that in an upcoming episode. But right now, I just want you to hold on to that. Because while you're watching weather change and it's being called climate change and all this other stuff, it really is just an auto correction and the bringing forth of the end. Because the thing that corrupts the finances of every world and every nation is the damage that's done by the change in weather. All the floods, all the drying up of the land, all of that creates a financial hardship across the world that people can't overcome. It's necessary to usher in the mark of the beast. All of this is part of the plan. And I want you to remember this. If you flip to the back of the back of the book, guess what? You win. You've already won. You don't need to be afraid because you've already won. I just want you to understand that. Jesus is for you. He's not against you. He's not here to hurt you. He's not here to watch you be in pain. He's not here to see you go through pain or be hurt or anything of the sort. It's part of what we have to go through as members of this earth, as part of his kingdom. But it will pass. You will pass into glory. We will all pass into glory. And voila, you will get to learn from the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the same way that Adam and Eve got to learn. Hold on to that. Because at the end of the day, that's the goal. The goal is to be trained by them, to understand them, to hopefully not have the second death take place or take hold or have a place over our lives. But in fact, for us to be able to continue to move forward in the Father and to see what it is that He has for us. He expects us to want rewards. It's not that we're doing it for the reward. It's that we're excited about what the reward is going to be for the work that we've done. I hope that that makes sense. And I hope you understand more about the Father that you serve. And on that happy note, I'm going to say good night, farewell, and I'll see you next Friday.